Hello, and welcome to The Sleepy Mind. Tonight, we are settling into the company of something that has been quietly astonishing the world for millions of years. Not a mountain or an ocean or a vast and dramatic wilderness. Something smaller than any of those things, and in many ways more improbable. A flower that grows in mud, that rises through dark, still water, that opens its petals each morning to the light and closes them again each afternoon as if it has learned, more thoroughly than almost anything else alive, the art of letting go. The lotus is not simply a flower. It is one of the oldest living symbols in human culture, carried across centuries and continents and dozens of languages, gathering meaning the way still water gathers reflection. It is a plant that cleans itself without being touched, that keeps itself warm without a fire, that holds seeds in its heart for 1,000 years, and then, given the right conditions, quietly begins again. There is something about the lotus that refuses to be reduced to one thing. It is ancient, and it is present. It is rooted in darkness, and it blooms in light. It is, botanically speaking, alone in its family, related to nothing else quite like itself. And yet, it is everywhere. On temple walls and painted scrolls, in medicine cabinets and kitchen pots, in the hands of deities carved from stone 1,000 years before anyone alive today was born. Even now, somewhere in a warm and shallow pond, a lotus bud is preparing to open. Slowly, the way all patient things move, with no urgency and no audience and no awareness of its own beauty. It simply does what it has always done. If these slow, curious journeys into sleep are something you find yourself returning to, it would mean a great deal if you liked this video or subscribe to The Sleepy Mind. It helps more tired and wandering minds find their way here, one quiet evening at a time. But for now, there is nowhere you need to be. Let your body settle into whatever surface is holding it. Let your hands rest softly, without gripping anything. Let your breath come and go without effort. Each exhale a small release. Each inhale a quiet arrival. Allow your eyes, if they are still open, to grow a little heavier with each passing moment. We are going somewhere still tonight, somewhere rooted in mud and rising toward light. Let's begin. The lotus flower that appears on temple walls, in sacred texts, and in the hands of carved deities across Asia belongs to a single species. Its name is Nelumbo nucifera. It is called the sacred lotus, or the Indian lotus, and it is the plant that has carried the weight of so much human meaning for so long that it is easy to forget it is, first and entirely, a living thing. There is a second species in the lotus family, Nelumbo lutea, the American lotus, which grows across much of North America and the Caribbean. It is pale yellow, quieter in its symbolism, and less widely known. But both species belong to the same small genus, Nelumbo, which is the only genus in its entire family. The lotus has no close botanical relatives. It stands alone in its classification, as singular in the plant kingdom as it is in the human imagination. This botanical solitude matters because it is often misunderstood. The lotus is frequently confused with the water lily, and the two are easy to conflate at first glance. Both grow in water. Both produce large, beautiful flowers. But they belong to entirely different plant families, as distinct from each other as an apple tree is from an oak. The lotus rises above the water. The water lily rests on its surface. The difference, once noticed, is impossible to unsee. The sacred lotus is an aquatic perennial, meaning it does not need to be replanted each year. It returns from the same root system, season after season, the way old knowledge returns to a patient mind. It is native across an extraordinary range, from Iran and India in the west, through the warmth of Southeast Asia, across China, Korea, and Japan, and south into the shallow tropical waters of northern Australia. It has been growing in these places for so long that no one can say with certainty exactly where it began. What can be said is where it chooses to live. Warm, shallow water. Calm, unhurried ponds and slow-moving rivers. Places where the mud is soft and the light finds the surface. The lotus has always known where to settle, and once settled, it begins to build something worth understanding. Look closely at the surface of a lotus leaf, and what you see appears perfectly ordinary. A broad, pale green circle, smooth and slightly matte, resting above the water on a long stem. But place a drop of water on that surface, and something unexpected happens. The water does not spread. It does not soak in. It gathers itself into a near-perfect sphere, sits for a moment like a small glass bead, and then rolls away, carrying with it every particle of dust and debris it encountered on the way. The reason for this is written into the leaf surface at a scale too small to see with the naked eye. Covering the entire upper face of the leaf are microscopic structures called papillae, tiny waxy bumps between 10 and 20 micrometers tall, arranged so densely that they create a surface the water cannot grip. The droplet balances on the tips of these structures, the way a person might balance on the points of thousands of needles simultaneously, touching the surface, but never truly resting on it. This property has a name. Scientists call it superhydrophobicity, and the lotus leaf is considered one of its clearest and most elegant natural demonstrations. The term was formalized by botanist Wilhelm Barthelot in the 1970s, after years of careful observation through an electron microscope. What he named the lotus effect has since become one of the most studied phenomena in materials science. What makes the lotus effect genuinely remarkable is not merely that water rolls off. It is that the water cleans the leaf as it goes. Dust, pollen, bacteria, fungal spores, even fine particles of mud, all of these are collected by the rolling droplet and carried completely away. The leaf emerges from a rainstorm cleaner than it entered it. This is not a clever adaptation. It is, in the quietest sense, a philosophy made physical. Engineers and materials scientists have spent decades trying to replicate it. Self-cleaning glass on buildings, water-repellent fabrics, anti-icing coatings on aircraft. All of them trace their origins back to this one leaf, growing quietly in a warm pond, doing what it has always done without any awareness of being remarkable. Even mud, which coats and smothers most things it touches, does not stick to the lotus. The same microscopic geometry that repels water prevents soil particles from finding purchase. The lotus rises from the mud and carries none of it with it. That, too, turns out to be something worth sitting with for a moment. The lotus flower does not hurry. It builds itself in layers, petal by petal, in a spiral arrangement that follows the same mathematical pattern found in pine cones and nautilus shells and the centers of sunflowers. Between 20 and 30 petals, depending on the variety, each smooth and slightly waxy, tapering gently to a rounded tip, arranged around a central receptacle that is visible even before the flower fully opens. In the wild, the sacred lotus tends toward pale pink and white, soft, considered colors. the kind that do not demand attention but reward it when given. Centuries of cultivation have expanded this palette considerably, producing deep rose, cream, yellow and flowers that carry two colors at once, their petals edged in one shade and centered in another. But the wildflower, growing undirected in a warm and muddy pond, almost always chooses something quiet. At the heart of every lotus flower sits the seed pod. It is flat-topped and cone-shaped, a pale yellow-green, and it is visible from the very beginning, present inside the flower even while it is still in bloom. Most flowers conceal their seeds until the end. The lotus offers its seed pod from the start, the future sitting openly at the center of the present. The fragrance of the lotus is mild and surprisingly complex for a flower that looks so simple. It carries something faintly sweet, with undertones that have been compared to anise, or to lightly spiced honey, or to something that has no easy comparison and must simply be encountered. The scent is strongest in the early morning hours, released as the flower begins to open, and it fades through the day as the petals close again in the afternoon warmth. This opening and closing is one of the lotus flower's most carefully observed qualities. Each bloom opens for 3 to 4 consecutive days, unfolding each morning and drawing closed each afternoon in a rhythm as steady and reliable as breathing. Not every plant that opens and closes does so in response to the same signals. The lotus responds to both light and warmth, the combination of the two being the precise invitation it requires. When the final day of blooming ends and the petals fall, the seed pod remains. It stays on its stalk through the months that follow, gradually drying and darkening, eventually becoming woody and brown, full of seeds, bending slightly under their weight. In traditional Japanese art, this dried pod is as beloved as the bloom itself. Impermanence is not the end of beauty. Sometimes it is where a different kind of beauty begins. There is a small and extraordinary secret held inside the lotus flower during the days it blooms. A secret that took scientists a long time to find, and longer still to fully explain. The lotus is warm, not warm the way a sun-heated stone is warm, passively accepting energy from outside. Warm in the way a living body is warm, generating its own heat from within, regulating it, sustaining it, maintaining a precise and narrow temperature range across days and nights and shifting weather. This property is called thermogenesis, and the sacred lotus is one of only a handful of flowering plants known to possess it. During the 3 to 4 days that a lotus flower is in bloom, its receptacle, the central structure around which the petals are arranged, maintains a temperature between 30 and 36 degrees Celsius. This is true even when the surrounding air drops to 10 degrees on a cool morning. The flower warms itself. It does not simply wait for the sun. The mechanism behind this warmth involves a rapid acceleration of cellular respiration in the receptacle tissue. The cells burn energy at an elevated rate, and heat is released as a consequence. What makes this genuinely unusual is that the lotus does not simply produce heat at a fixed rate. It modulates the output. When temperatures fall, heat production increases. When temperatures rise, it decreases. The flower is not passively warm. It is actively maintaining a temperature, the way a body does, responding to conditions in real time. Roger Seymour, a botanist at the University of Adelaide, studied this phenomenon in detail in the 1990s and documented the lotus's thermoregulation with precision. he found that the metabolic mechanism it uses bears a meaningful resemblance to the heat-generating processes found in warm-blooded animals, a convergence that evolution arrived at independently, in a flower, in a pond. The purpose of this warmth is believed to be the attraction of insect pollinators. Certain beetles, which are among the lotus's primary pollinators, are drawn to the warm interior of the flower on cool mornings, finding there a sheltered and thermally comfortable place to feed and to mate. The flower holds them. They linger longer than they otherwise would, and in lingering, they transfer pollen more thoroughly, completing the exchange the flower requires. It is a relationship built on warmth offered freely, and the cost to the lotus is real. Generating and maintaining this heat requires significant metabolic energy, which suggests that evolution found the exchange worth making again and again across millions of years. The flower gives warmth, life continues. Something in that is not entirely unlike the oldest forms of generosity. In 1994, a group of scientists working in northeastern China brought a seed back to life. This is not an unusual sentence in botanical research. Seeds are germinated regularly, their dormancy broken by warmth and moisture and time. What made this particular germination unusual was the age of the seed. Carbon dating placed it at approximately 1,300 years old. The seed had been lying dry and dormant in a lake bed since roughly the 7th century, through the Tang dynasty and everything that followed, through 1,000 years of history, quietly waiting. The plant it produced was healthy. It bloomed. It set new seeds of its own. The interruption of more than a millennium had left no visible damage. The lotus seed achieves this extraordinary longevity through a combination of physical and biochemical protection. Its outer coat is exceptionally hard and nearly impermeable, sealing the embryo inside against moisture, oxygen, and the microbes that break down most organic material over time. Inside this coat, the seed maintains a desiccated, low metabolism state that slows biological aging to something approaching stillness. Among the proteins found within the lotus seed is a heat shock protein, a molecular tool that appears to protect the seed's cellular machinery from the slow damage of time. It is as if the seed has its own internal preservation system, developed long before human beings discovered the concept of archiving anything. To germinate, the seed first requires scarification. Its hard coat must be abraded, scratched, or worn away enough to allow water to enter. In nature, this happens through contact with stones and sediment at the bottom of a pond. In cultivation, a gardener does it with a small file or a piece of sandpaper, a delicate preparation for something that has waited a very long time. Inside every lotus seed, no matter how old, is a tiny green embryo called the plumule. It holds within it the beginning of the first leaves, coiled and patient, unchanged by centuries. To look at it is to hold something that is both very old and entirely ready to begin. The seed is released from its pod in a way that carries its own elegance. As the pod dries and the stalk becomes brittle, the wind moves the stalk back and forth like a lever, and the seeds are catapulted outward into the surrounding water, landing at various distances from the parent plant. The lotus does not simply drop its seeds, it sends them. Beneath the still surface of the water, beneath the mud that holds the lotus in place, there runs a horizontal stem called a rhizome. It is thick and pale, segmented like a series of linked chambers, storing nutrients through the months when the plant above has died back and the surface of the water is cold and still. The rhizome is the lotus's continuity. It is what allows the plant to return each spring from exactly where it was, reliable as memory, unhurried as old growth. Cut a lotus rhizome crosswise and something beautiful is revealed. Running through its interior are 9 air channels arranged in a ring, visible to the naked eye, each a perfect circle, the whole cross-section resembling a small and intricate diagram of something architectural. These are not decorative, they are functional. The channels carry oxygen from the leaves down through the stem and into the root system below, sustaining the plant in the oxygen-poor, anaerobic mud where it grows. This ventilation system is continuous and efficient. It allows the lotus to live where most plants could not, in sediments where the absence of oxygen would suffocate any ordinary root system. The lotus breathes all the way down to its deepest point, through a network of hollow pathways that connect the sunlit leaf above with the dark, airless mud below. The rhizome is also food. It has been cultivated and eaten across China, Japan, Korea, and India for more than 3,000 years, appearing in records from the Zhou dynasty in China as a vegetable of daily use. Its texture is distinctive, remaining crunchy even after extended cooking due to the structural integrity of its air channel walls. Sliced thin and held up to the light, each round reveals its pattern of circles, an image familiar in East Asian food markets and temple kitchens alike. Beyond crunch and beauty, the rhizome is nutritionally generous. It contains dietary fiber, vitamin C, potassium, and a range of B vitamins, a density of nourishment that has sustained communities through ordinary meals and ceremonial ones for millennia. In large natural ponds, a single rhizome network can spread across several square meters of mud, sending up dozens of individual stalks, each one carrying leaves as wide as a child's arm span and flowers that open to the morning light. What appears above the surface as many separate plants is often, below it, a single connected organism, quietly spreading through the dark. No other flower appears as consistently across Buddhist art, architecture, and teaching as the lotus. From the earliest carved stones of ancient India to the painted temple ceilings of Tibet and Japan, from the simplest village shrine to the most elaborate ceremonial hall, the lotus is there. Not as decoration, though it decorates, as meaning, as a symbol that has been chosen again and again across traditions and centuries, because it holds something that words alone have found difficult to carry. The quality it is most commonly associated with is purity, not the purity of something untouched or removed from the world, but a different, more interesting kind. The purity of something that passes through difficulty without being defined by it. The lotus grows in mud. It rises through dark water. It blooms above both, clean and open, carrying none of the murk it emerged from. For a practitioner working to cultivate wisdom and compassion within the conditions of an ordinary human life, this was immediately recognizable. The mud is not an obstacle to the flower. It is what makes the flower possible. In many Mahayana Buddhist traditions, the lotus's 4 stages of growth are used as a map of spiritual development. The seed resting in mud, the stem pushing upward through dark water, the bud waiting at the surface, the flower opening fully to the light. Each stage is understood as a state of awareness, a point on a path that does not happen quickly and cannot be forced. It simply unfolds when the conditions are right. Tibetan Buddhist iconography places lotus thrones beneath the feet of countless deities and bodhisattvas. To sit on a lotus is to inhabit a state that is in the world, but not governed by it. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, known in Chinese Buddhism as Guanyin and in Japanese Buddhism as Kannon, the embodiment of compassion, is almost always depicted with a lotus close at hand, its presence indicating that the compassion being offered is unlimited and untainted by personal preference. The mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, one of the most widely recited phrases in Tibetan Buddhist practice, contains within its syllables a reference to the lotus. Padme is often rendered as the lotus, and the phrase points towards something luminous held at the heart of the practitioner, as a jewel might rest within an open flower. The historical Buddha is described in early texts as having walked 7 steps at the moment of his birth, and with each step, a lotus flower bloomed beneath his foot. Whether understood as literal or as poetry, the image holds the same idea. Wherever consciousness arrives fully, something pure has a chance to open. In Theravada Buddhism, the lotus offers one further teaching, quieter than all the others. The way a lotus leaf holds water without absorbing it, the way a droplet rests on the surface and then simply rolls away, is understood as a physical demonstration of non-attachment. The leaf is fully present in the water. It is not distant or remote. It simply does not cling. For practitioners working with the nature of desire and release, the lotus offers this lesson not in words, but in the simple fact of its surface. Long before Buddhism carried the lotus across Asia, the flower was already deep inside the symbolic life of the Hindu tradition. In Hindu cosmology, Brahma, the creator of the world, was born from a lotus that grew from the navel of the god Vishnu as he rested in the cosmic ocean between creations. Creation itself emerged from a flower. That is not a small beginning. Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, beauty, and prosperity, is almost never depicted without the lotus. She stands or sits on an open pink flower, holds additional flowers in 2 of her 4 hands, and is surrounded by lotuses in bloom. Her association with the flower is so complete that Padma, the Sanskrit word for lotus, is one of her most common names. When artists painted her for centuries without any written instruction, the lotus arrived automatically, carried in the hand by habit and by meaning so long established it had become inseparable from the figure itself. Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, music, and the arts, keeps company with the white lotus, which carries associations with clarity of mind and the kind of beauty that arises from understanding rather than from surface. The white flower, clean and simple, blooming in stillness, was understood as a fitting companion for a deity who represents the flowering of the interior life. The Sanskrit word Padma is among the oldest and most widely used words in the Hindu and Buddhist traditions. It appears thousands of times in classical texts, in names of places and people, in mantras and devotional poetry, in architectural terminology, and in the names of meditation postures. Padmasana, the lotus posture, is both the physical position of seated meditation and the name for the divine throne, linking the body of the practitioner to the seat of the sacred in a single word. In ancient Egypt, a different flower carried similar weight. The Egyptian blue lotus, Nymphea caerulea, is technically a water lily rather than a true lotus, but its symbolic life was no less profound. In Egyptian tomb paintings and temple carvings, it rises from the primordial waters at the beginning of creation, the first thing to appear from the deep before the world had taken shape. The sun god Ra was said to have emerged from a blue lotus at the beginning of time, the flower opening on the first morning, the light arriving from within a flower. Ancient Egyptians used the blue lotus in ceremony, and its chemistry may have contributed to its sacred status. It contains compounds that have mild sedative and psychoactive properties, suggesting that the flower's relationship to altered states of consciousness was understood and perhaps deliberately cultivated in ritual contexts. What moves through all of these traditions, Hindu and Egyptian and Buddhist, is a consistent intuition that the lotus represents something the human mind recognizes but cannot quite name directly. Something about emergence, about purity, about the possibility of beauty arising from unlikely conditions. Different cultures, arriving at this flower independently, found in it the same unspoken thought. The lotus has been carved in stone, woven into silk, painted on lacquered wood, pressed into clay, and cast in bronze across so many centuries and so many cultures that tracing its full artistic history would take more lifetimes than any one person has. What can be said is that wherever it appears, it carries the weight of something considered and deliberate. No one chose the lotus casually. In the 3rd century BCE, the Indian emperor Ashoka embraced Buddhism and commissioned a series of stone pillars to be erected at sites of significance across his empire. The bases of these pillars were often carved with inverted lotus flowers, a design called the lotus capital that became one of the defining visual elements of early Buddhist architecture. The famous pillar at Sarnath, where the Buddha gave his first teaching, rests on a lotus base beneath its 4-lion crown. That crown is now the national emblem of India. Across Southeast Asia, the lotus appears in the stonework of some of the largest religious structures ever built. At Angkor Wat in Cambodia, at the Borobudur Temple in Indonesia, at temples throughout Thailand and Sri Lanka and Myanmar, carved lotus flowers frame doorways, decorate columns, crown towers, and border the images of seated Buddhas. They were placed there not because stonemasons happened to like flowers, but because the people who designed these spaces understood that entering a sacred building should feel like entering a different kind of world. And the lotus, with its associations of rising and opening and becoming, was precisely the image that said so. In traditional Chinese painting, the lotus is one of the 4 noble plants, alongside the orchid, the chrysanthemum, and bamboo. Each of these 4 plants is associated with a human virtue. The lotus represents integrity, specifically the capacity to remain honest and uncorrupted when one's surroundings are not. The image of a pure flower rising from muddy water became shorthand for a quality of character that the scholar tradition prized above almost everything else. Japan received Buddhism in the 6th century CE, and with it, the lotus, which moved immediately into ceramics, lacquerware, kimono textiles, and temple architecture. The flower appears in Japanese art in every degree of stylization, from the nearly photographic to the nearly abstract, but always recognizable, always carrying its accumulated associations intact. In Tibetan Buddhist Thangka paintings, The lotus appears in the borders, in the thrones of depicted deities, and in the hands of figures who hold it as both offering and symbol. The conventions governing its appearance were developed over centuries and are still followed today, each placement and color carrying a specific meaning available to those trained to read it. Across all of this, the lotus has been more than decoration. It has been a language, patient and consistent, available to anyone who took the time to look. The lotus is not only a symbol, it is also, in the most practical and tangible sense, a plant that feeds people, heals people, and clothes people in ways that have continued for thousands of years with very little change. Nearly every part of the plant has been found useful. The root, the stem, the leaves, the seeds, the embryo inside the seeds, the flower petals, the stamens, and even the thin silken fibers inside the stem have each found their place in the long, careful human relationship with this plant. In traditional Chinese medicine, the seeds of the lotus are considered valuable for calming the mind. They are used to address restlessness and insomnia, prepared as teas or incorporated into sweet soups that are given to people whose sleep is troubled. The seeds have a mild, slightly starchy flavor, and their sedative reputation has been consistent enough across centuries to attract the attention of modern researchers studying nuciferine, one of the alkaloids present in lotus tissue, which has shown preliminary evidence of sedative and anti-anxiety properties in laboratory settings. The small green embryo inside the lotus seed, called the plumule, is bitter in taste and prepared separately as a tea. In traditional Chinese medicine, it is used specifically for anxiety and the kind of unsettled mental state that makes rest impossible. It is a remedy for what might now be called an overactive mind, offered in a preparation made from the very structure within the seed that holds the potential for new life. In Japan and Korea, lotus root powder dissolved in hot water is a traditional evening drink consumed before sleep in the same way that other cultures have reached for warm milk or chamomile. Its warmth and mild flavor make it a simple ritual of settling, the body receiving something gentle before rest. In Ayurvedic medicine, the petals and stamens of the lotus flower are used as preparations for the heart and nervous system, described as tonics for the kind of calm, clear awareness that both traditions associate with the flower itself. The most extraordinary practical use of the lotus, and perhaps the least known, involves the fibers found inside the plant's stems. When a lotus stem is broken and pulled slowly apart, fine silken threads emerge at the break, stretching between the two pieces in a way that resembles the threads of a spider's web. These fibers can be extracted, cleaned, twisted, and spun into a textile of rare quality, pale and lustrous, slightly textured, unlike anything produced by any other plant. In Myanmar, this lotus silk has been spun and woven for centuries into ceremonial robes offered to sacred Buddha images. A single robe requires the stems of approximately 2 million lotus flowers, gathered by hand from lakes, processed by skilled weavers, produced slowly and with extraordinary care. Lotus silk is among the rarest textiles in the world, not because it is hidden, but because nothing about it can be hurried. Elsewhere, lotus leaves serve as wrappers for food steamed over fire, their surface imparting a faint, clean fragrance to the rice or dumplings cooked inside them. The flower's scent, so difficult to isolate that true Lotus Absolute remains one of the rarest and most expensive ingredients in fine perfumery, is used in traditional incense preparations across Asia in forms that require no extraction at all. Only the flower, brought fresh into a room, releasing what it carries naturally into the air. The lotus gives generously. It always has. And what remains, after all the giving, is still the flower itself, opening each morning over still water, clean and unhurried, as if none of the rest of it had happened at all. As we come gently to the end of our time with the lotus, let everything we have moved through settle for a moment before it softens and fades. We began in the mud. That is where the lotus always begins. We followed a root system spreading quietly through dark sediment, breathing through hollow channels, patient beneath water that showed nothing of what was coming. We watched a stem rise slowly toward light it had not yet seen, carrying with it a bud that would become something so carefully considered in its structure, so precise in its opening and closing, that human beings across dozens of cultures and thousands of years looked at it and found in it a mirror for what they most wanted to understand about themselves. We learned that the surface of a lotus leaf is a kind of architecture built at a scale invisible to the eye that allows nothing to cling and everything to pass cleanly through. We discovered that the flower itself is warm, not passively, but deliberately, maintaining its own temperature in the way a living body does, offering that warmth to the creatures it needs and receiving in return exactly what it requires. We sat with seeds that waited 1,000 years in dry lake beds, and then, when the conditions were finally right, began again. We moved through kitchens and medicine rooms and temple courtyards and painting studios, and everywhere the lotus had arrived before us, already present, already useful, already meaning something. We held, for a moment, the extraordinary fact that 2 million flower stems can become a single robe, carried to a sacred image by hands that understood the offering required everything slow and careful they had. Underneath all of it, running like water beneath stone, was one quiet suggestion that the lotus has been making for longer than any written tradition has existed. That it is possible to be rooted in difficult conditions and to bloom anyway. That what surrounds you does not have to define you. That opening and closing and opening again is not inconsistency. It is the most natural rhythm there is. There is nothing in any of this that asks anything of you tonight. No practice to begin. No understanding to secure before sleep arrives. The lotus does not require an audience to open. It simply opens in the early morning over still water, because that is what it does. And you can simply rest now in the same way, not because you have earned it or prepared for it correctly, but because rest is what the body does when the day is finished and nothing more is needed. If these quiet journeys with the sleepy mind have found a place in your evenings, you are warmly welcome to leave a like or to subscribe or to leave a thought in the comments below. It helps more tired
to stay.